A very good morning to you. Watching Sky News at 10 o'clock. We're going to be live outside the Royal Courts of Justice in just a moment with Sam Washington with the build-up to that key decision relating to Prince Harry. But we start with a bit of breaking news this morning on the British teenager Alex Batty, who's been found in France 6 years after he went missing. In the last few minutes, Greater Manchester Police have been giving an update on plans for him to return home to his family and their investigation into what happened.
I'm Assistant Chief Constable Chris Sykes of Greater Manchester Police. I think I speak on behalf of the whole of Greater Manchester Police when I say we are relieved and overjoyed to receive the news from the French authorities that they believe Alex Batty has been found safe and well. It's been 6 years since his disappearance. This is a huge moment for Alex, for his family and for the community in Oldham. Alex went missing whilst on holiday in 2017 when he was just 11 years old. On Wednesday, a member of public reported a potential sighting in the Toulouse area of France. The young man identified as Alex and was taken to a French police station. The young man and Alex's grandmother spoke on a video call last night, and whilst she is content that this is indeed Alex, we obviously have further checks to do when he returns to the United Kingdom. Our main priority now is to see Alex returned home to his family in the UK, and our investigation team are working around the clock with partner agencies and the French authorities to ensure they are all fully supported. Alex and his family remain our focus, and we still have some work to do in establishing the full circumstances surrounding his disappearance and where he has been in all those years. I can only imagine the emotions they have experienced as a family throughout this ordeal. I would ask that they be granted privacy as they come to terms with what's happened and they try to find a way to move together as a family with their lives going forward. Thank you.
Great. Are you all done with your live? Yeah. Okay, so we'll take a couple of questions now. As I've said a couple of times, we've really put pretty much everything we know at this stage in the statement, and so the closer your questions are to that, the better. If you ask other questions, if Mr. Sykes can't answer them, he will do, but if you can't, we'll just have to get back to you when we know the answer, which will likely be when Alex is back in the country and when officers have had a chance to speak to him and after the full debrief with the French authorities. So if you want to let me know who wants to ask questions, and then I'll come to you one by one. Go ahead.
Rowan Bridge from BBC News. Can you give us any sort of timeline about Alex's return to the UK and his family?
We're working hard with the French authorities to bring Alex back as soon as possible. He's getting well cared for by the French authorities at the moment. They're in Toulouse. We're in close liaison with them and the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and our priority is to get him back to the UK and get him back to his family in Oldham as soon as possible.
But do you know what that looks like in terms of timeline?
I expect it to happen over the next few days.
Go ahead.
Rachel Allison, ITV News. Is there any detail of where he's been, please?
I've seen some of the media reports of where he may have been. That is at the heart of the investigation that we carried out. Clearly, we need to speak to Alex. We need to speak to Alex when it's right to speak to Alex to establish the full facts.
So you have no detail of where?
We have no detail of where he's been. There's lots of speculation. We want to speak to Alex.
Okay.
How is the search for his mum and granddad going?
So as part of the investigation, we have a dedicated team working with the French authorities. Clear at the moment the priority is speaking to Alex and think about Alex's safeguarding, Alex's well-being and supporting his family here in Oldham. But obviously his mother is part of that conversation and investigation.
You said, obviously, you said that Alex and his grandmother have spoken. Can I ask how they both are?
Well, from what I've seen from the officers that have spoken to the grandmother, she has a whole host of emotions and feelings, as you could imagine. Alex is getting looked after by the French authorities. They are safeguarding him there and looking after him really well.
You wanted to ask a question? I've not got your name, I'm so sorry.
It's more or less the same thing.
Okay.
What sort of state he's in at the moment?
Imogen?
Oh, sorry, mine was the same question. How Alex is and how his demeanour is.
So Alex has been looked after by the French authorities. They've been looking after him really, really well. We've been in close liaison with them. And obviously our real concern is how we bring Alex back to the UK in a safe way and make sure we look after his well-being. The family here in Oldham, we're in close liaison with those. They're obviously massively relieved, and a whole host of emotions are going through their mind at the moment as they come to terms with this good news.
The breaking news there that Alex Batty, who's been missing for 6 years, will return to the UK in the next few days. Well worth checking the Sky News website. A lot on there on this story, including an interview with the man who helped him reach a police station in France yesterday. I'm now going to hand over to Sam Washington for all of the build-up to that key legal decision outside the Royal Court of Justice for us.
Yes, a very good morning to all of you from here, the Royal Courts of Justice in central London. And it'll be today at around 10:30 this morning where we think that the Duke of Sussex will find out whether his legal action against the Mirror Group newspapers will have been successful. The judgment will be delivered behind closed doors there behind me. It is a case, of course, it is the first against a newspaper group to go to trial, which has attracted not just national media, but international media as well. You've probably got a sense of how busy it is here behind me with the different television crews all gathering. Also, helicopter sound of the blades whirring overhead there. Just a reminder, Prince Harry became the first senior British royal for 130 years to appear as a witness in court. 1891 was the last time a royal appeared in court. He was here for a case that lasted about 6 or 7 weeks giving evidence. He faced 8 hours of questioning over 2 days in the witness box in a case which, as I was saying, drew the attention of not just national but international media. Well, joining me here this morning and indeed throughout the day, our royal correspondent Laura Bundock. Good morning to you, Laura. Before we get into the case itself, are we likely to see Prince Harry today?
I don't think so, but I am pretty certain he will be watching, regardless of the time difference, on that video link from his home in California, because this case means a huge amount to him. Let's not forget, this is all about him and his crusade, as some have called it, taking on the British tabloid press. The trial itself just 7 weeks long, the deliberations 7 months long, and today, very soon, one single judgment. This is such a personal moment for Prince Harry. He is trying and is set out to try and prove that Mirror Group newspapers used illegal means to source their stories about him. He believes that it was widespread, that it was habitual, that everything they did caused him grief, that it caused deep suffering, deep distress, caused his relationships to suffer, caused mistrust, particularly with his brother, Prince William. Mirror Group strongly deny all his claims. They always have maintained he doesn't have a single item of evidence. And as my report now explains, in a moment's time, we're going to find out who the judge believes.
Harry versus the headlines, and a case that put the tabloids on trial, testing how far they went to score their stories. 7 weeks at the High Court, but this was a showdown years in the making. A historic trial, and one that's deeply personal.
Harry is the first royal in 130 years to be in a witness box, so it's completely extraordinary. And I think Harry was really using this as an ability, a moment to really sort of pour his heart out about what's been going on and how he feels about this press intrusion which has dogged him for his whole life.
Harry's case centred on 33 articles, all published by Mirror Group papers, and all, he claimed, the product of phone hacking or blagging, obtaining information by deception. He said nothing in his life was sacrosanct, and these stories collectively caused paranoia and depression. The Mirror has previously admitted phone hacking, but said in Harry's claims there was no evidence. One former tabloid editor says this is judgment time for the Prince and the press.
In a strange way, there are going to be no winners, whatever the outcome of this case is. But Harry, because he sees this as in his mind as a crusade he's on, he's not bothered about how much money he might win or he might lose. It is having his day or his days in court.
By bringing a privacy case, Harry has publicly aired difficult and personal moments. But unlike others who've settled claims, Harry has the money and motivation to see this through. Royal relationships with the press are complicated. Prince William secretly settled a case with the publishers of The Sun for a large sum of money.
Harry, though, never wanted to settle. But what's fascinating about his case is the timing. On the one hand, battling at the High Court over breaches of his privacy, while on the other, releasing a tell-all memoir, a Netflix series and numerous interviews, all revealing intimate details about him and his family.
Are you harming your family, Harry?
If taking on the tabloids was his life's work, Chapter 1 is almost over. As today we learn whether Harry's won his first battle with Fleet Street.
We've just seen the arrival of Harry's barrister, David Sherborne Casey. Doesn't look like Prince Harry is going to be here, Laura, this morning. The judge has had a lot to consider, hasn't he, before we get this summary statement shortly. It's not going to be a black and white judgment by all expectation, is it? It's going to be quite complicated. What are some of the things that we're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, it could run into 150 pages or so. The hearing itself won't take very long, but the judge has to look at 5 major things. There is what's called this generic case. It's a broad case where he will have to answer questions about whether or not he believes there was widespread habitual phone hacking and blagging, obtaining information illegally going on, whether or not private investigators were being used, whether they were acting illegally. And then this is the big question, I think, for a lot of the claimants. Who knew about this? Did senior executives, including the likes of Piers Morgan, know what was going on? Did they encourage it? And did they try to conceal this behaviour? Now, they have always denied it. Piers Morgan strongly denying it. But this is one of the key points here. There are lots of articles to be gone through as well. Prince Harry has a sample of 33 articles involved in this case. The other claimants have a few as well. And don't forget, it's not just the 4 involved in this case. There are 80 other claimants involved in the action itself. So should this judgment decide that there is at least a partial win for Harry and the others, then it could easily open the gates for more claims to come forward and put some really difficult questions on the doorsteps of those senior executives.
That'd certainly be an interesting statement to pore over. It's going to be a complex one as well. And just a reminder of some of the detail that got us to this point here. As Laura was saying, Prince Harry's case was one of 4 test cases that was heard by the High Court earlier this year. You might remember it was over the summer, just before the coronation of King Charles. Well, the Duke of Sussex says that Mirror Group journalists used unlawful methods, he says, including hacking and blagging to gather information about him. Well, Michael Lavelle, who plays Kevin Webster, you might know him from Coronation Street, he told the High Court that stories printed about him had made him extremely paranoid as he wondered where the paper had got the information from. And one of the other test cases, the former Coronation Street actress Nikki Sanderson, said that she thought it was friends, colleagues and members of the public that had been selling stories about her. Well, in court, MGN apologised for paying private investigators to get information about her, but it says that her claim relating to more than 30 articles has been brought too late. Well, Fiona Whiteman, she's another of the chosen test cases. She's the ex-wife of the comedian Paul Whitehouse. Well, she says that she suffered press intrusion while she was being treated for ovarian cancer. Well, MGN has admitted paying a blagger, as it's known in the trade, to try to get her medical records, but it says that her case has also been brought too late. or the High Court, is due to rule on Prince Harry's privacy case against Mirror Group newspapers. Prince Harry claims that 147 stories were published by the gaining of information unlawfully. That is what the judge is going to make his summary judgment today, and that is what we are going to be looking for, not just the case of Prince Harry, but also of the other 3 test cases which were heard during the trial throughout the summer. Well, joining me now is the media lawyer Jonathan Code, and also joining us with Laura Bundock, our royal correspondent, who's with us throughout the morning. Morning to you, Jonathan. Just step back for the benefit of our viewers. This is one of several trials. We've been hearing about each stage. What is the significance of today?
I don't think it can be understated, really. I don't think it can be overstated, I should say. I mean, this is just, let's, as you say, step back. This is the second son of the King of England. The allegation that he's making is not that it's just been once or twice, but unlawful interception of information has gone on serially on the part of this newspaper. And he's also alleging that not just that newspaper is a body, but the allegation go right to the top. I reread the skeleton argument on the way here. Allegations are made against the senior management, against Piers Morgan, against someone who's not very well known, but is an important figure, the in-house lawyer at the time, Marcus Partington, who I fought many times at the time. So this is an allegation of institutional criminality against one at the Reach Group, one of our biggest newspapers, and this has been fiercely denied. So if a judge finds in Harry's favour today, then a number of things flow, in particular that there's been a collective denial, which isn't true on the part of the group, but also there is the risk of criminal proceedings because a civil finding of wrongdoing has been found. It's not the same as a beyond reasonable doubt. But the police are then going to have to think, well, do we have to prosecute people?
And just, it's important to understand as well that Prince Harry is one of 4 test cases who was selected out of more than 100 potential claimants. So what then flows from a judgment in favour of any of those claimants with regard to the other 100?
Well, forgive me, once this isn't quite a test case, you're quite right that the judge picked 4. Now, there's a long queue. It's like a sort of queue of trains trying to get into the station being the court and trial. Now, the court has finite resources, so what the judge did is he did his best to pick out 4, which in particular he didn't think were ever going to settle. Now, Prince Harry has made it clear he's not going to settle this case. So the judge said, well, if Prince Harry's case isn't going to settle, we may as well have a trial. Now, in one sense, it's hugely important, but of course for the other 3, it's no less important for them because of the huge impact that this activity has had on their lives.
Yeah, and as you were saying there, the reason that it's actually got to this trial is because there were some people like Prince Harry, Laura, who didn't want to settle. For him, it was a matter of principle.
Yeah, he was never going to settle. I think this is not about the money. This is about having everything we heard during the trial aired in public. He wanted this moment. He believes that great injustice has been carried out. He went further in that witness statement he gave, talking about the need to reform the British the media. He felt that it had gone down the wrong path, that it was his almost right, if you want, to set things right. But it is a huge moment for him. And don't forget, this is one of his 3 actions he has against tabloid newspaper groups. So what happens today could have huge ramifications for the other 2 cases that are still outstanding, that are still going through the process. This one against Mirror Group has gone as far as trial. The other 2 haven't yet. But I think what happens here will have an impact on those others, without a doubt.
Could I just jump in on that point? Because I know them. I can tell Laura that she's right, because it's the senior lawyer at the Mail and the senior lawyer at the Sun were both attending the Harry trial. So both other newspaper groups are looking very carefully to see how this is going.
And the case, indeed all of the cases, have become synonymous with phone hacking. But this is a much broader issue than that, isn't it? It's about unlawful obtaining of information.
You're absolutely right. And in the trade, it's called UIG, unlawful information gathering. And there are all sorts of ways that it's alleged that this has been done. blagging, various ways of obtaining documents that through lies or whatever. We live supposedly in a protective circle of privacy. Now, quite how big that circle is and when it should be penetrated is difficult. But essentially what Prince Harry is saying is that I enjoyed a circle of privacy and that was constantly and illegally invaded by the Mirror in all sorts of different ways.
All right, well, we are waiting for Lord Justice Fancourt's judgment, which will be delivered this morning. In the meantime, let's take a look at what led up to this moment. The publisher of the Daily Mirror, the Sunday Mirror and Sunday People was taken to court, as we've been hearing, by Prince Harry and a host of other celebrities who accused them of widespread unlawful activities between 1991 and 2011. Journalists and private investigators at the publisher are alleged to have hacked phones and obtained private details by deception, and that senior editors and executives were aware and approved of the action. MGN is contesting the claims, saying the accusations are not supported by evidence. It also argues some of the cases were simply brought too late. Prince Harry claims that he was targeted by MGN for 15 years and is seeking damages of around £440,000. The case saw him become the first British royal in 130 years to give evidence in court. The Duke of Sussex faced 8 hours of questioning over 2 days in his landmark court appearance. You are watching Sky News. We are here live at the High Court. We'll be bringing you that judgment as it's delivered here at the Royal Courts of Justice. Do stay with us.
And I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Well, the plan seems to be to head to the police station where the policeman who fired the shots was based.
And everything, his memories is all gone.
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
We have to get Trump out of the White House.
I'm playing devil's advocate.
You got your political agenda.
No, it's honestly...
God love you.
And beyond the United States, I report from around the world.
This is a town that is effectively encircled by the Russians.
We take you to the heart of stories that shape our planet.
Yeah, I can hear now quite a few explosions in the distance here in Jerusalem.
What do you think of ISIS?
Everybody here, they know the truth of ISIS.
Good morning and welcome back to the Royal Courts of Justice here in central London, where today, this morning, the Duke of Sussex will find out whether his legal action against Mirror Group newspapers has been successful. We're awaiting Mr. Justice Fancourt's judgment any moment. Joining me, though, to talk us through what we can expect this morning and what it means, indeed, for the Duke of Sussex, our royal correspondent Laura Bundock and also the media lawyer Jonathan Code. And hello again to you too. Laura, we saw Prince Harry's barrister arrive, David Sherborne. We don't expect that we're going to be seeing him today. What is the importance of what we're going to hear this morning to the Duke of Sussex?
It's hugely important, and without a doubt he will be watching this from his home in California via the video link. We've often heard, haven't we, he's spoken about how tackling the British tabloid press and the methods they use to source their stories was going to be his life's work. He has made it a mission to try and hold them to account, to expose what he believes is the illegal behaviour, the illegal practices they were using to get those stories. A lot of the evidence is circumstantial. Mirror Group is saying there wasn't a single item of evidence you have. Harry says, well, we know that you've admitted phone hacking in the past, so it therefore follows that someone like me, a high-profile person, would surely have had that done to them. He said there is no other way that you could have produced these stories about me without using information that had been blagged, that had been obtained illegally, phone hacking and the likes. So it is a circumstantial case, but remember the bar is slightly lower because this is not a criminal case, it's a civil case. So it has to be on the balance of probabilities that a judge will make this determination. But it's taken him 7 months. The judge knows that what happens here is a huge moment for all phone hacking cases, and phone hacking has become a shorthand for all this kind of illegal behaviour. But it will be a big moment. It is a significant ruling. Harry won't be here in person, none of the other claimants here too, but it is a very, very significant day and will have big impacts, I think, on the other cases he is bringing today.
Yeah, well, let's bring you in on that, Jonathan. Other than it being the first of these to actually go to trial, the broader significance legally really speaks to matters of privacy, doesn't it? Fundamental human rights.
Well, it is. It does, but I think Laura's hit it on the nail. When the bigger issue, I think, is how the press is regulated. At the end of the Leveson Inquiry, the only thing that really mattered was what was going to replace the Press Complaints Commission. Now, Harry is saying that at the moment the press essentially is a wild animal. Tony Blair called it feral, which I think would be also a word that Prince Harry would use. Now, if with this judgment and a series of other judgments, it's clear that the criminal activity of the newspapers is far wider than expected, but also, quite importantly, that they're still denying it, which is also an important issue, then it goes back to the question of would it be better if our press was not regulated entirely by themselves, but by something like Ofcom? Now, the press would rather be, taken away in chains and burnt alive than to be regulated by anything that looks remotely like Ofcom. But time and time again, despite their supposedly being regulated, this is what they get up to. And this will then, if Harry wins, will be yet another point of evidence that the regulatory system which we have in this country for the press doesn't work.
Yeah, big potential ramifications. And just to simplify it for the benefit of our viewers, Jonathan, what are we looking for in the judgment? Because it's not going to be a black and white, is it?
Well, it will be black and white in one sense, in that there will be a winner and a loser. But you're quite right in the sense that Harry could win, like in a football analogy, he could win, 7-0 or 1-0. Because there's been a whole series of allegations made of particular incidents and particular articles that have been generated by incidents. And the poor judge is going to have to try and pick his way through this and say, well, I'm with Harry on that, but I'm with the Mirror on that. And then there's the other free radical, which is the issue of limitation. Which ones have effectively been so late sued on that they can't be adjudicated by a judge because they're time barred. So there are these flying issues. So Mr. Justice Fancourt will have done his best. The other thing, the poor man will know not only that everyone and his dog will read his judgment, more particularly, he's likely to end up in the Court of Appeal or possibly in the Supreme Court. So he'll be particularly careful. So he's going to try and pick his way through this and do the best he can. And as Laura rightly said, a lot of it's circumstantial evidence. And that makes his job even more difficult because he's going to have to try and draw conclusions. There aren't the smoking gun, which ideally a claimant wants. And the newspapers say, well, there is only circumstantial evidence, but the court can still find that on balance, on the balance of probabilities, rightly as Laura says, on balance, this activity took place.
OK, all right, thank you very much indeed. I know that you're staying with me throughout the morning while we await that judgment for Mr. Justice Fancourt. In the meantime, I'm joined now by the journalist and media commentator Nigel Pawley. Very good morning to you, Nigel. This couldn't be a bigger moment, could it, for Mirror Group newspapers?
Yeah, well, I disagree with, I think it was Jonathan, he's a lawyer. There are winners in this. The winners over the last 20 years have been lawyers who have made millions from these cases. Now, the rights and wrongs of this are, we will find out whether Prince Harry, with circumstantial evidence, wins this case. There isn't a journalist in Fleet Street who didn't know that there was some sort of hacking. Let's be honest about it. But I must defend my profession a little bit. These cases are 20 years ago. Things have moved on. The problem was mobile phones were very new when this came out, and people, I think it was made illegal a couple of years before these cases came up. So it was a different world. A lot of the people who were working there no longer work in Fleet Street. Newspapers have changed. They're now clickbait. They now just try and chase headlines on Twitter or X. The days of having teams following Prince Harry and the royals around are very, very different. But they're still paying the price. And the Mirror Group could be in serious trouble here. They've already spent 150 million defending these cases. And if they lose today, they're making a few hundred people redundant just before Christmas, and newspapers across the country. The newspaper world is dying on its feet, sadly. The profession and the industry.
Yeah.
And this could become the death knell, actually, for that.
We understand, Nigel, that the judge's summary is being delivered as we speak. We'll bring you that as soon as we can. You were saying there that, mobile phones were new, the technology was new, but this is broader than that, though, isn't it, Nigel?
Yeah,
this is about unlawful information gathering, and there are many different tactics used, not just phone hacking.
Yeah, private investigators. I mean, private investigators, again, are used by lawyers in court cases. Let's not make out that they're the sort of paragons of virtue. They use these. I know that. And I know some of the private investigators they have used. Newspapers used them rather lazily originally to get addresses when they were in a hurry. When newspapers actually sent reporters to addresses, they would use them to find that out. Unfortunately, or allegedly, some newspapers went further than that and used them, whether they asked them to do it or whether the private investigators did it and provided with a package. That's something that the judge will decide. But yes, private investigators and the dark arts, they used to call it, bin dipping, trying to get medical... I don't know any journalist who's ever dressed as a doctor, by the way, and I've been a journalist for many, many years, 40 years, but allegedly people used to go around hospitals and pose as doctors and things. Things have changed. If people did wrong, they need to be held to account. That's the end of it. That's the basic argument, isn't it? Whoever they are, whether they're now a famous television presenter, whether they're an editor of a newspaper, or whether they were a lowly hack. And ironically, most of the people...
Yeah, I was just going to say, do you think the senior executives and board members have been held to account as they should have been?
I don't, because what I recall, and a lot of people I know were arrested 10, 15 years ago from different newspapers. Most of them actually were cleared, but these are on payments and various things to people. I always felt it was wrong because they were signed off by executives. And at the end of the day, if I took a check from the newspaper I worked at to someone, I was handing it over. It wasn't my money. It was signed off by an editor, an executive editor, a news editor. Those people, funnily enough, I don't recall any of them being held to account. I think one or two were in the dock. But if you're running a newspaper and illegal activities are going on, if you don't know about it, then you're not in charge of the newspaper. And if you do know about it, it's wrong. So you're either a very bad editor or you're an editor who hides things up. That's the simple answer to it. Editors know everything. Editors are very hands-on. They should be anyway.
Nigel Pawley, thank you very much
you.
for speaking to us this morning on Sky News. Apologies if I was interrupting you there. I can't hear you very well.
Okay.
We've got the sound of the helicopter above us there. We still have our royal correspondent, Laura Bundock, and media lawyer Jonathan Code here with me now. We understand, Laura, that the judge has started delivering his statement now. We don't yet know what is in it, but just remind us again the significance for Prince Harry. He is awaiting judgment on 33 articles, isn't it, that he says were published based on the unlawful gathering of his information.
That's right. 33 is a sample of a bigger pot of articles, but these articles range from articles about his late mother, articles about his ex-girlfriend Chelsea Davy, articles about injuries he sustained while at school, all of which he said caused him harm, caused him grievance, caused him distress. He said it caused and led to him feeling depressed, feeling paranoid, feeling like he couldn't trust anyone around him. He had no idea how these stories were ending up in the newspapers. And he is setting out now to prove that he believes and that Mirror Group newspapers were employing private investigators to act illegally, that they were hacking into his phone, his voicemails were being intercepted, that they were blagging, trying to get hold of his private information, his medical records, credit card, all this kind of thing he says was going on, that it was habitual, that it was widespread. And in Court 30 behind us, a different court to where the trial took place, Mr. Justice Fancourt is reading his judgment, his summary judgment. He has had to pick through all the evidence that we have heard, and he has had to make big decisions about whether or not he believes Harry or whether or not he believes Mirror Group.
Yeah, and it's taken him months, hasn't it, to get to this point. And as you were saying to me earlier, Jonathan, Mr. Justice Fancourt knows that the details of this judgment are going to be pored over meticulously. Prince Harry waiting for judgment on 33 articles. What would success for Prince Harry, do you think, look like in legal terms?
Well, he can win or lose on any particular one of the articles. The problem the Mirror has, in one sense, Harry wins if he wins for one. Of course, the way that it'll be presented, I fear, in the press, who tend to look after their own, is that if Harry only wins one, I suspect there'll be lots of jumping down and whooping, well, it was only one, and it was all a waste of court's time and everything else like that. But I don't think Prince Harry will see it that way, because, as we discussed earlier, this is a man on a mission. If the main problem, if he's only recorded a win on one or two, is probably going to be on the issue of cost, because then there'll be an almighty argument between both sides as if he's partially won, well, how much of his costs should we get? So that is going to be something which arguments get quite heated about the costs quite often, and perhaps less so with Harry, but with others, that this may be a big financial issue for him. I think there's one other thing to say. Almost certainly Harry himself knows, because what normally happens is that the legal teams on both sides will get a copy of the judgment perhaps 3 or 4 days before. So my guess is that Harry has been told which way that the case has gone. He'll want to see it read out in court. My guess is that he found out perhaps middle of the week. The judgment is sent out with the judge to fact check and for typos and all that kind of thing. So most times both sides will know before the judge actually sits down and reads it which way he's decided.
And what are the ramifications for the other claimants who were not called on to give evidence in that 7-week trial in the summer, should this go against the newspapers today?
Well, there's a sort of momentum which builds up. The Mirror has to make important decisions. I mean, the amount of money that this has cost them just in their own legal fees will be astronomical. So every time they go in front of a judge and fight something, the damages will be X, the costs will be Y, and Y will be a lot bigger than X. So if there is a sense on the part of the Mirror Group that time and time again they're going to lose, then they're going to be more likely to settle cases in the future.
All right, Jonathan, thank you very much indeed. Jonathan Code, our royal correspondent, Laura Bundock, with me all morning while we await the judgment from Mr. Justice Fancourt. A reminder that Prince Harry's case was one of 4 test cases that was heard by the High Court earlier this year. The Duke of Sussex says that Mirror Group journalists used unlawful methods, including hacking and blagging, as it's known in the trade, to gather information about him. Michael Lavelle, who plays Kevin Webster in Coronation Street, told the High Court that stories printed about him had made him extremely paranoid, as he wondered where the paper had got the information from. And the former Coronation Street actress Nikki Sanderson said that she thought that friends, colleagues and members of the public had been selling stories about her. Well, in court, MGN apologised for paying private investigators to get information, but says that her claim relating to more than 30 articles had been brought too late. And Fiona Whiteman, who is the ex-wife of the comedian Paul Whitehouse, says that she suffered press intrusion while she was being treated for ovarian cancer. MGN has admitted paying a blagger to try to get her medical records, but it says that her case has also been brought too late. Well, let's bring back in Laura Bundock, our royal correspondent. Hello, Laura. People have accused Prince Harry of almost having a personal vendetta against the press, but particularly as well Piers Morgan.
Yes, and Piers Morgan is a name that came up in Harry's witness statement. It is a name we know, it's a very well-known name, isn't it? But I think Harry has argued that Piers Morgan singled out him and Meghan, that he was bullying them with his language, that he went way further than was acceptable when it came to how he spoke about them. And Harry believes that Piers Morgan is among those who knew what was going on when it came to allegations of phone hacking and blagging. Not only that they were authorising it, and they were at times hiding it. This is something strongly denied by Piers Morgan, but it really is personal. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if, because Piers Morgan's name has come up, because Piers Morgan himself did not appear to give evidence here, he was not a witness, that his name is not mentioned. I'd be surprised if it doesn't get a mention in the judgment. Which way, we don't know, but I'm sure the judge will have something to say about that. And it has this huge implication, doesn't it? Because you have these very, very senior executives, all of whom have been named in this case, who have never come forward and said, we knew this was going on. There's never been they've acknowledged that phone hacking happened, but not that these senior people knew about it. So if that is found to have been the case, and you might have people who under oath have said it didn't take place, well, where does that leave everything? Because that's when we start to look at, well, do the police get involved, for example? But for Harry, this is a very, very personal case.
And Jonathan, in terms of corporate governance, this could be very significant, couldn't it? Because Laura's saying there, the senior executives are saying, well, what the private investigators were doing, or some very junior journalists were doing, we didn't know about. This could change all of that.
Well, I think it could, but I have to say, I think most of us regard that as pretty implausible. I'm put in mind of the wonderful Hugh Grant quotation where he said during the course of the Leveson Inquiry, well, when it comes to Rebecca Brooks, there are only two possibilities. Either she knew about what was going on, criminal activity in her newspaper, or she's the worst journalist in the world because she didn't know what was going on in her own newspaper. And I think to some extent, this goes for the senior executives in Mirror. I mean, in practical terms, I find it hard to believe. I've been engaged in the media and dealing with the print press for 30 years. I find it very hard to believe that newspaper executives could be running a title where this kind of serial activity goes on and they don't know what's going on. I've really struggled to believe that.
So if liability is pinned on people who have hitherto denied any involvement in it, what is the follow-on from that?
Well, there are a number of possible, quite serious possibilities. One is that the government may go back to the evidence that was given to the Leveson Inquiry and say, well, you know, you gave this evidence on oath, now doesn't look like it was entirely true. But the other possibility is if there has been criminal activity on a sort of corporate scale, well, A, the corporation could face charges, and B, senior members, senior personnel of the corporation could face criminal charges. that would be really a can of worms opened up.
OK, apologies for interrupting you there. We are getting some of the headlines coming out from Mr Justice Fancourt's judgment being delivered as we speak, Laura, in which it finds extensive phone hacking by Mirror Group newspapers from 2006 to 2011, even to some extent during the Leveson Inquiry into media standards. That is according to the High Court Judge, Mr Justice Fancourt, in the statement that he is delivering now. Pretty significant, isn't it?
It certainly is. I mean, the Leveson Inquiry was looking exactly at this, and yet while this was taking place, the phone hacking, the blagging was continuing. The judge is having to look at this period which he believes phone hacking and blagging was taking place. He was having to consider how long it was going on for. Was it taking place earlier than that? It was a bit, he's decided, but it was particularly going on and widespread from 1996. So you'll have to look at who those executives were, who those editors were at that time, and draw conclusions as to how much they would have known about it at that point.
And as a broad statement, that will be the sort of thing which the Duke of Sussex will feel vindicates all of his efforts.
Yeah, without a doubt, because he has set out to prove that it was taking place, that if it was as widespread, then why wouldn't he, as the subject of so many column inches at the point, have been targeted by this kind of activity, because they knew that having him in their papers sold stories. So why wouldn't they go to whatever lengths they could to source stories and use, as it seems to be alleged, whatever means they could to get those stories?
And Jonathan, we're also understanding as well, as far as the knowledge of the board is concerned, the only, Mr Justice Fancourt has said, the only directors who knew before 2011 of phone hacking were Paul Vickers and Sly Bailey. The board as a whole were not informed. Bailey and Vickers didn't tell the board. It was concealed from the board, Parliament, the public and the Leveson Inquiry.
Well, that's still pretty senior. I mean, Sly Bailey, is pretty near the top. So, OK, so the board as a whole didn't know, but, someone on the board clearly has. But I want to go back to that overall finding. Based on what Harry has set out to achieve, the first finding that there was this serial phone hacking during this time, even during the Leveson Inquiry, I mean, that is mind-boggling. He'll feel that whatever else comes in the judgment, it was well worth the effort. So, it started out, I think, with a big win for Harry.
And in terms of the Mirror Group newspapers, the next stage for them will be an appeal, would you expect?
Well, they may well. I mean, they may feel they have to. It's the Court of Appeal has the jurisdiction to overturn a first instance judge, but this is a very experienced judge. He heard the evidence. He had plenty of opportunity to think about it. My guess is that the Court of Appeal will be reluctant to say, well, despite the fact Mr Justice Fancourt actually heard Prince Harry, had the opportunities to check the evidence against what he said, this is what the Mirror would now have to do. If they want to appeal, first of all, they have to apply to Mr Justice Fancourt for permission to appeal. Now, on the whole, judges will normally say no. They'll say, no, if you want permission to appeal, you have to go to the Court of Appeal. So the first stage they would have to do is get permission from the Court of Appeal to appeal. Only if that is granted will they get the appeal. So it's actually not an easy road to get their judgment appealed.
And Laura, I know you've been monitoring further detail of that judgment while I've been speaking to Jonathan there. I don't know whether you can bring us any more detail on it.
So you remember there are 4 claimants involved, Prince Harry the most prominent, but Nikki Sanderson, the actress, and Fiona Whiteman, the ex-wife of Paul Whitehouse, have both had their claims barred. The time has expired. They've run out of time to bring their claims. It was thought that might be the case because there is a set period, and we know that Prince Harry, that Michael Lavelle got their claims in before that period, but the other 2, it was looking less likely. So their claims over the articles written about them will not be heard. That it's expired. But don't forget, they are still part of the generic case, the broader questions the judge will be part of. So in a way, they won't win on those articles, but they could win on the generic case.
And at the moment, we're just getting the top headlines, aren't we, from this? We don't know about the detail in terms of the number of articles that Prince Harry's team had put forward.
Yeah, there were 33 articles in total, and they were selected, regarding Prince Harry, they were selected from a much bigger sample.
Nearly 140.
Yeah, well over that covered a big range, a period of time of his life, big events in his life, all of which he says were either written using information that had been got through phone hacking or blagging private investigators, doing dodgy checks on him, acting illegally. That's what he claims. Mirror Group have always said, no, we didn't do that with you. We've done it on other people, yes, hands up, but not when it came to Prince Harry. You don't have a single piece of evidence when it comes to that, and it is very circumstantial with Harry's claims on these articles. He says it's because they were using burner phones, and they were covering their tracks. It's made it very hard for him to find the evidence. But we will find out very soon, though, of those 33 articles, whether or not the judge believes Prince Harry that he was hacked into, that he was the victim of blagging as well.
And Jonathan, just stepping back for a moment. The judge finds extensive phone hacking by Mirror Group newspapers over a period 2006 to 2011, even to some extent, and I saw you flinch when I read this out initially, during the Leveson Inquiry itself.
It is extraordinary. I mean, the temerity, the hubris of a newspaper during the course of the Leveson Inquiry still to carry on the activity which is the subject of the trial, even for me, who's very old and warty in dealing with the media, that still did make me a sharp intake of breath.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. We are understanding that as far as the Duke of Sussex's case goes, proved in part, he managed to prove in part that 15 out of 33 of those articles were the product of phone hacking or other unlawful information gathering. His phone was probably only hacked to a modest extent, carefully controlled. However, it did happen between 2003 and 2009. Now, the Duke of Sussex was criticised, wasn't he, a lot, notably by the newspapers for not producing sufficient evidence to show that his phone was hacked. They claimed it was just an assumption by him. Well, that doesn't appear to have been the judgment of Mr. Justice Fancourt.
Well, there was always an unreasonable assertion. I mean, these guys weren't fools. They were essentially like the equivalent of industrial saboteurs, industrial spies. So they went around their job very carefully, and they covered their tracks very carefully. So I think the judge will always have been sympathetic to Prince Harry. So, well, how was he going to know this? Where is he going to get the smoking gun? But that number, that proportion of articles makes it clear that in any substantial sense he has won.
I was just going to bring you in on that, Laura. You've been speaking to his legal team. 15 out of 33, on the face of it, less than half. But will his team view that as a success?
I think they certainly will, because even one of those cases would have proved that the Mirror were wrong when they said we didn't do this. And clearly the judges found that for 15 out of the 33 articles that were discussed, they were the product of unlawful information gathering. Perhaps not to the extent that Harry thought, and perhaps it wasn't the case that his phone was constantly being hacked, but it did happen, and the judge has made it clear he believes it happened between 2003 and 2009. We've been told now that the damages Harry receives will be modest. The directors turned a blind eye and positively concealed it, and I think the total sum of damages to Harry at the moment, I think, will be around the 140,000 mark. But as we've been saying, it's
not about the money.
It's not about the money. It really hasn't been about the money. This case will have cost millions for all, but it was about having the moment, having the chance to have this aired, and proving that he was a victim of phone hacking and blagging, and that's what he has done. Not for all 33 articles, but for 15 of those, so nearly half. He has won. It will be a victory, I think, for his team.
Will he donate those damages to one of his various charities, do you think?
We don't know yet, but that's been the suggestion, isn't it? As I say, it's not about the money. He doesn't need this money. He has a lot of charitable causes, lots connected with the military. There is an assumption that the money will go there. He will be listening in right now, hearing what's happening, and probably making these decisions as it goes along. But I think you know, the money Harry gets is sort of a byproduct of a much bigger thing here, that he wanted to take on the tabloids. He believes that their actions affected every part of his life, caused him huge distress, paranoia, depression, caused a breakdown of relationships, not just personal ones, but family ones as well, such as the impact, and continued to do so. His relationship with Meghan, they felt forced out of the country. So I think there will be a big sense of vindication from him, finding out today that 15 out of those 33 articles were the product of illegal behaviour when it came to sourcing stories.
We're getting a bit more detail, and this with regards Michael Turner, otherwise known as Michael Lavelle, Coronation Street actor. 4 articles out of 27 were due to hacking, unlawful information gathering, £31,650 in damages, including aggravated damages as well. What's your take on that, Jonathan?
Bless him. He'll be hugely relieved. I mean, it's a very long battle. I mean, I've acted for a whole load of celebrity clients. I mean, taking on a tabloid newspaper is not for the faint-hearted. You know, I have been personally threatened by newspapers, let alone clients. So he's battled his way through. It's not a huge sum of money that he'll recover in damages. He'll get, hopefully, most of his costs back. But again, I suspect, you know, a lot of it, his feeling, certainly when I've acted for clients in this way, is that they've made their point. They've stood up against, you know, Goliath in the form of David, and they've put the stone in the forehead, and they've won. So 31,000 in terms of how much some of these claimants have got is a relatively modest sum of money. But my guess is that he'll go away thinking it was worth the effort.
Can I take you back to part of Mr. Justice Fancourt's judgment as regards the Duke of Sussex, in which he says that he's entitled to a further sum because the directors knew, they turned a blind eye and positively concealed it. That's pretty significant.
Yes, and that's an aggravating factor, as we call it. I mean, again, as we've agreed, the money's not going to be a big thing, and I'm quite sure that it'll be given away for charity. But here, again, this is exactly what Harry wanted to establish. You and I, we can go back to the one rogue reporter, remember, at the beginning of the news world, one rogue reporter, and eventually it was shown that was nonsense. And we're in the same ground again. And gradually it's been moved up the sort of editorial and social scale. Harry has found that right from to the top, maybe not the whole of the board, but right to the top, that newspaper conspired to rob him and his family of their privacy. That is a monumental success on his part. If we go back to one point about the damages, you'll interrupt me if something else comes up. The only significance may be that in the run-up to this trial, I'm guessing that Harry will have been offered very large sums of money to settle. Now, once the damages are awarded, if the offers were higher than that, then the newspaper can put the letter in front of the judge, say, well, on such and such a date, we offered him, say, 250,000, he got less. So from the date of that offer to
otherwise
the trial...
known as the quantum, isn't it?
With the quantum, old-fashioned Latin term. But we made an offer, say, 3 months ago, to settle at a higher level. So for those 3 months, not only should Prince Harry not get his costs, but he should pay our costs. So there may be a bigger significance than the modest sum, than just that sum itself. It may have an impact on where the costs go as well.
OK, well, we understand that the judgment has been delivered in full now. David Sherborne KC, Harry's representative, is on his feet addressing the judge. Laura, in terms of the Duke of Sussex, this isn't the end of the road for him, is it? This is one of several cases that he is pursuing. He will feel emboldened by this judgment.
He will. I mean, let's just recap on what's happened to Harry. He has won and proved that he was a victim of phone hacking and blagging in 15 out of those 33 articles, and he has been awarded £140,600 as a result of that, in part because directors knew about it, turned a blind eye and positively concealed it. He will see particularly that part as a huge victory, because this is one of the 3 cases he's taking on. So we've had the Mirror Group. This is now finished. He is also taking on News Group, the publishers of The Sun and the defunct News of the World, and he's taking on associated publishers of, among other titles, the Daily Mail. Now, we know in the case when it comes to The Sun, he's not allowed to bring in phone hacking. The time ran out of that, but that was about a fifth of the case. And I know we think phone hacking is the big word here, but unlawful information gathering involves much more.
Yes.
It's the private investigators, it's the blagging of his private details and the like. That is all going through the courts as well. So the publishers of The Sun will be watching this very carefully, as will the publishers of the Mail too, because this kind of outcome could well be down the road for them. Of course, it will be for judges to decide in a different courtroom on a different day, but it is significant what's happened.
And Jonathan, we understand as well that there is the potential that the Duke of Sussex may now go forward on another 114 articles.
Well, he will have been emboldened by this judgment. And again, this is a man on a mission. But I want to go back to Laura's point, and it's something we touched on. So this is a massive finding for the senior people at that group. So they've been found, A, to have been knowing complicit in serious serial criminal activity against the King's second son, and then essentially spend a lot of time and money trying to cover it up. Now that is enormous. Now the next question that the management will be thinking, and probably telephone calls going to criminal lawyers, well, how likely is it we're now going to get charged?
Well, we've had a statement, I should say, from MGN spokesperson, which reads, "We welcome today's judgment that gives the business the necessary clarity to move forward from events that took place many years ago. Where historical wrongdoings took place, we apologise unreservedly, have taken full responsibility and paid appropriate compensation." Sounds very much like they are wanting to draw a line under it.
They'll be desperate to draw a line under it. But we can't get away from the fact that it's taken this long, and this absolute rigid denial and investment in lawyers to cover this up is all part of it. It's one thing to say, OK, we want to draw a line on it and we're awfully sorry once the judge has found the wrongdoing. But the point is, the information which showed that they were engaged in wrongdoing was available to all the time. Well, why has it taken this long? Why has Prince Harry been dragged to a trial to establish that you've been doing wrong, which you knew anyway? So it's not a line underneath. At least it certainly shouldn't be, in my view.
Yeah, the other newspaper groups are going to be watching very closely, aren't they? Thank you very much indeed for that. Don't go far away. It is just after 11 o'clock. We are live for you here at the Royal Courts of Justice in central London. In the past hour, a judge has ruled that there was extensive phone hacking by Mirror Group newspapers between 2006 and 2011. Mr. Justice Fancourt has been passing judgment on a privacy case brought by the Duke of Sussex and others against the publisher of the Daily Mirror. He found that 15 out of 33 articles about Prince Harry were the product of phone hacking or other unlawful information gathering. Well, I've got here with me all morning our royal correspondent, of course, Laura Bundock, and media lawyer Jonathan Code. Prince Harry will be viewing this as a triumph, and the potential that he could also go forward with more than 100 other articles as well, Laura.
That's right, and that's what's going to be decided at another hearing in January, I understand. So it's called a consequential hearing, but basically it means how much of the gates can be opened to bring forward extra claims. Because remember, it's not just the 4 claimants that are involved in this whole case. There were 80 in total, a huge number, with their own claims. They were sort of put on one hold. They've been sort of stayed, as it's called. Will they be unstayed? Will they be allowed to bring their cases now? Can they settle? Can Harry have more of his 147 articles heard? That's what is going to be decided at a later day. For Prince Harry, though, today is a huge day. This has been, as he has said, his life's work. He wanted to prove what the British tabloid press were up to. We know from his memoir, his own father, the King, thought it was a suicide mission trying to take on the press. I think Harry certainly, for part of it, has proved him wrong. He has proved that he was hacked into, that there was illegal behaviour taking place. Perhaps his phone wasn't hacked as much as he thought it was, but he has proven for those 33 articles involved in this case, 15 of those were written using information that had been obtained illegally, and that there were directors at Mirror Group who knew what was going on and tried to hide it as well. And I think for that part, it will be a win in the eyes of Harry.
Indeed, in a statement, he himself said this isn't just about phone hacking, this is about accountability of power. And what we saw, Jonathan, in the judgment was really sort of the higher levels, which have hitherto said we didn't know what was going on. That has been brought into the light, hasn't it?
Well, it's thumpingly brought into the light, and I think Prince Harry's put it well. Accountability of power. And that's what he set himself to do. He's taken on the whole village, the whole kingdom of Fleet Street, and it is a mighty kingdom. It's a very powerful kingdom. And one of the things, one of the other calls that's going to take place now for sure is Leveson 2, because you'll remember there was supposed to be a Leveson 2. So as to holding to account these senior people, it's an absolute win. But I think we should also go back and remember how his mum lost her life. As a youngster, he lost his mum in many ways because of the intrusion of the press into her life. Now, many will say, well, she to some extent invited it, but at least as far as he's concerned, that's not the end of it. His mum was driven to her death by this very kind of activity. And so he'll feel that for her sake, as well as his wife's sake, who he'll feel has also been ill-treated by the press, this is a reckoning which he has long wanted and he has now thumpingly obtained.
All right, Jonathan, thank you very much indeed. I can just bring you a little bit more detail of that judgment that we've had handed down by Mr. Justice Fancourt within the last half an hour. It reads, I have found the Duke's case of voicemail interception and unlawful information gathering proved in part only. I found that 15 out of the 33 articles that were tried were the product of phone hacking of his mobile phone or the mobile phones of his associates, or the product of other unlawful information gathering. I consider that his phone was only hacked to a modest extent and that this was probably carefully controlled by certain people at each newspaper. However, it did happen on occasions from about the end of 2003 to April 2009, which was the date of the last article that I examined. There was a tendency for the Duke in his evidence to assume that everything published was the product of voicemail interception because phone hacking was rife within Mirror Group at the time. But phone hacking was not the only journalistic tool at the time, and his claims in relation to the other 18 articles did not stand up to careful analysis. It goes on. There were also a number of separate invoices unconnected to published articles, which I consider to be evidence of unlawful gathering of the Duke's private information. I have accordingly awarded the Duke damages in respect of each of the articles and invoices where unlawful information gathering was proved. I have also awarded a further sum to compensate the Duke fully for the distress that he suffered as a result of the unlawful activity directed at him and those close to him. I recognise that Mirror Group was not responsible for all the unlawful activity that was directed at the Duke, and that a good deal of the oppressive behaviour of the press towards the Duke over the years was not unlawful at all. Mirror Group, therefore, only played a small part in everything that the Duke suffered, and the award of damages on this ground is therefore modest. I have also awarded a sum for aggravated damages to reflect the particular hurt and sense of outrage that the Duke feels because two directors of Trinity Mirror, to whom the board had delegated day-to-day responsibility for such matters, knew about the illegal activity that was going on at their newspapers and could and should have put a stop to it. Instead of doing so, they turned a blind eye to what was going on and positively concealed it. Had the illegal conduct been stopped, the misuse of the Duke's private information would have ended much sooner. Jonathan, I know that you're poring over the detail of the judgment as we speak, as I was reading it out there, but that will be held by the Mirror Group newspaper as significant, won't it, where it says that the Mirror Group itself was only responsible for a small amount of the unlawful behaviour that the Duke of Sussex suffered.
It will be some comfort, but I mean, in one sense, if someone's burgled your house, the point is they've burgled your house. How much of the silverware they got is relatively irrelevant in my view. The fact is your house has still been burgled. Prince Harry's privacy has been burgled. That has been established. Now, one of the things we're poring over is the extent to which this was known upstairs, so to speak. So we know that Paul Vickers and Sly Bailey are found to have known, but there's one other significant player here, which I've just read. I can get it back. I have found, this is again from the judgment, I found that Marcus Partington, who became the Deputy Legal Director under Mr Vickers from 2007 and then Group Legal Director in 2004, when Vickers left Trinity Mirror, was aware of the use of illegal phone hacking from no later than the end of 2003. Now that is a humongous finding, perhaps so much for your viewers, but that means the in-house lawyer, the most senior lawyer, the lawyer at that newspaper knew that this was going on. Now, if we're in a situation where even the lawyers at newspapers, whose job supposedly is to make sure that they operate within the law, have themselves been complicit, then that's another layer of suggested institutional rottenness on the part of Fleet Street, which the judge has found. And I dealt with Marcus many, many times, and I know how powerful he was there. This would be a body blow for him.
And Laura, in terms of the Duke of Sussex, 15 of these 33 articles, the judge has said, yes, were published on the basis of unlawfully gathered information. He will be heartened by the fact that the judgment does go higher up the ranks at the newspaper, won't he?
Yeah, because it wasn't this case just about arguing about 33 articles, certainly not for Prince Harry. I think what was more important was what was called the generic case, this broader case, this set of questions the judge had to consider about not just the period that he believed phone hacking was taking place, but the extent to which it was taking place and who, importantly, knew about it. How far up that chain of command was it known that phone hacking and all these methods of unlawful information gathering was taking place? Was it being authorised? Was it being encouraged? Was it being concealed and hidden? And we now have some of those answers, and that kind of contributed to the sum of money Harry was awarded, because the judge believes that directors did know about it, that they did try and conceal it, and that is a really big thing for Prince Harry, because he's argued that it wasn't just a few dodgy PIs being involved here, that it was at a much senior level that this was known about and this was being authorised.
We've seen, just stepping back from the case for a moment, we've seen Prince Harry more and more estranged from his family, haven't we, over the last few years. He has been taking this on very much as a personal crusade. How is it viewed in the palace, this fight that he's taken on? Will they be proud of him today?
There will be absolutely no comment from Buckingham Palace or Kensington Palace on that, I am certain. All we know about how they feel about it is that small section of his memoir Spare, where he talks about a conversation with his father in the grounds of Windsor Castle, where his father said it's a suicide mission trying to take on the tabloid press. Harry comments, I'll soon show him he was wrong. And perhaps to an extent Harry has. I don't think the royal family, I mean, I'm sure every time they hear Harry's name pop up in relation to a court case, they kind of put their hands over their eyes, their hands over their ears a bit, because they will never do this. We've actually, as a result of Harry's cases, we found out that his brother, Prince William, settled for a significant sum of money, a case with another newspaper group. They don't want this they don't want to be doing this themselves. They would never, I don't think, we would never see another senior member of the royal family in the witness box as we have with Harry. I mean, you have to go back to the 1890s to find the last time a senior royal popped up at the height. That's how it doesn't happen. It really was unusual to have him here, but I think he felt it had such a huge impact on his life, such a huge impact on his relationships and his wife and his current family situation, that he wanted to take it all away. He wanted to prove this had happened. He wanted it aired in public court, and that's what's happened.
All right, the two of you, I think, with me all morning, thankfully, to be talking us through the very many wide-reaching ramifications of the judgment that we have had handed down within the last half an hour. For now, though, let's bring in Steve Barnett. He's a board member at Hacktoff and also Professor of Communications at the University of Westminster. Steve Barnett, very good morning to you. What is the most significant aspect of that judgment to your mind?
Well, it's just an extraordinary judgment. I've been listening, watching your coverage, particularly listening to Jonathan, and I think the points that he's making in particular about effectively a board-level cover-up is really quite extraordinary. That, you know, the judge finding that the chief executive of a major publishing company knew that there was criminal activity going on under the name of journalism and did nothing about it, covered it up. Even at the point, and this is even more extraordinary, as I understand it, the judge is finding that even up to the point where the Leveson Inquiry was taking place, so we had a major public inquiry 12 years ago into phone hacking, even at that point, when the dam had broken and apparently publishers and journalists were falling over themselves to apologize, it was still going on. And sorry, go on. I'm sorry. To some extent, very unusually, I'm lost for words.
What do you think? What do you think should happen next? What do you think should happen next? Because there are many of these executives who said we didn't know anything about it. They said it at the Leveson Inquiry.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and they said it under oath. And I think that may be a matter for the police. To what extent are we talking about contempt of court? Because that was a judicial inquiry. Jonathan mentioned, I think it's worth talking about this. It mentioned the second part of the Leveson Inquiry. There was supposed to be a part 2, which was designed precisely to look at exactly what happened, who knew what, who authorized what, not just at Mirror Group, but in the other publishing companies that you've been talking about. The government, and I think we have to talk about some of the politics of this, the government, under huge pressure from the powerful press corporations, cancelled the second part of that inquiry. And had it gone ahead, we wouldn't have needed all these court cases. We wouldn't have needed Prince Harry to start taking on the press, let alone the other people who are actually going to be following on in his footsteps now that the dam has broken. We could have actually had all of this aired out in the open. And the judge himself said he found it significant that neither Piers Morgan or Neil Wallis, who was editor of The People during some of that time, were prepared to give evidence at the trial. So I think there is a real question here about why was that second part of the inquiry cancelled. You ask a very good question about what happened.
Sorry, I need to cut you off there. So Steve Barnett, I need to interrupt you there. We're just about to hear from David Sherborne, KC, Prince Harry's representative throughout the trial.
As well as accountability. The court has ruled that unlawful and criminal activities were carried out at all 3 Mirror Group newspaper titles, The Mirror, The Sunday Mirror and The People, on a habitual and widespread basis for over more than a decade. I'd like to thank my legal team for so successfully dismantling the sworn testimony of Mirror Group's senior executives, legal department and journalists who at least turned up to court, unlike their colleagues who were perhaps too afraid to do so. This case is not just about hacking. It is about a systemic practice of unlawful and appalling behaviour, followed by cover-ups and destruction of evidence, the shocking scale of which can only be revealed through these proceedings. The court has found that Mirror Group's principal board directors, their legal department, senior executives and editors such as Piers Morgan clearly knew about or were involved in these illegal activities. Between them, they even went as far as lying under oath to Parliament during the Leveson Inquiry, to the Stock Exchange and to us all ever since. The journey to justice can be a slow and painful one, and since bringing my claim almost 5 years ago, defamatory stories and intimidating tactics have been deployed against me and at my family's expense. And so, as I too have learnt through this process, patience is in fact a virtue, especially in the face of vendetta journalism. I hope that the court's findings will serve as a warning to all media organisations who have employed these practices and then similarly lied about them. Mirror Group's actions were so calculated and misleading that their pattern of destroying evidence and concealing their unlawful behaviour continued into the litigation itself, and as the judge has ruled, even to this day. I am happy to have won the case, especially given that this trial only looked at a quarter of my entire claim. Even on just that, it is clear Mirror Group's persistent attempts to suggest that my claim was, to quote their counsel, fantastical, in the realms of total speculation, and there was simply no evidence at all to suggest I was hacked. Zilch, zero, nil, nada, niente, absolutely nothing. All of that was total nonsense and was used maliciously to attack my character and credibility. However, as Mirror Group intended, those hollow sound bites were blasted across front pages and across online platforms and into the next day's morning television shows. The court has in fact confirmed that all 4 claimants were subjected to voicemail interception and unlawful information gathering, but no one would have believed that was the case given how this trial was covered in the UK. My commitment to seeing this case through is based on my belief in our need and collective right to a free and honest press, and one which is properly accountable when necessary. That is what we need in Britain and across the globe. Anything else is poisoning the well for a profession we all depend on. The acts listed in this judgment are prime examples of what happens when the power of the press is abused. I respectfully call upon the authorities, the financial regulator, the stock market who were deliberately deceived by Mirror Group, and indeed the Metropolitan Police and prosecuting authorities to do their duty for the British public and to investigate bringing charges against the company and those who have broken the law. Today's ruling is vindicating and affirming. I've been told that slaying dragons will get you burned, but in light of today's victory and the importance of doing what is needed for a free and honest press, it is a worthwhile price to pay. The mission continues. Thank you very much.
Statement there read out by David Sherborne KC, the barrister who's been representing the claimants, notably also the Duke of Sussex there. Some quite poignant statement read out from the Duke of Sussex, who says that the judgment has been vindicating and affirming. He also says the fight continues. Joining me still, our royal correspondent Laura Bundock. Clearly, Duke of Sussex elated by the judgment there and suggests that he's not going to be stopping there.
No, and we know that there will be a hearing at a later date to determine whether or not the other articles that were written about Harry can be considered by a judge about this as well, because clearly Harry believes that this is a win for him, that he has been vindicated. Very strong language, I think, from his barrister there, naming names, making no mistake in his eyes, that there was a serious illegal activity happening within those publications, and that Harry was the victim of this, and clearly proved by the judge in 13 out of those 33 articles that was the case. I'm just going through those articles to try and find out which ones, and it seems there was an article, do you remember, written about Harry smoking cannabis and his father's reaction to that. The judge deciding those 2 articles were definitely the subject of voicemail interception, not Harry's phone, but of those close to him.
And Jonathan, a lot of detail in this judgment, but stepping back, this is a landmark day.
Well, I think we should step back, because that's the right thing to do. Landmark, I don't think it's putting it too high. I mean, this is a senior member of the royal family who has taken on a very powerful media group and has won comprehensively and utterly, in my view. The fact it's only half the articles won't worry him in the slightest. What he's got is a finding from a judge, heavily fought. I mean, the newspaper had an army of lawyers, a much more powerful army of lawyers than Prince Harry did. I mean, I watched them. There was probably 2 or 3 times as many lawyers behind them. Despite that, he has won through and established that right to the top, right from Paul Vickers and Sly Bailey downwards, down to the newspapers, and between, importantly, Marcus Partington, all were complicit in this activity.
And in terms of what it says about not just the extent of the unlawful information gathering, but the liability, what is the read across, do you think, from this case to other cases, to other claimants?
Well, to other cases, most importantly, I think you've got to immediately think, well, he's taken on News UK, the Sun publisher, and Associated Newspapers who publish the Mail titles. Now, I imagine there's going to be some stiff drinks taken in the boardroom, because Harry is clearly on a mission. He's won this first battle, and he's smelt blood, and he's a warrior. Harry fought the Taliban. He's a warrior, and he's on it. So he's not going to stop now. So there are all sorts of questions of, well, what should be done about Paul Vickers, Sly Bailey, and as indeed in the Prince's statement, it looks as though they lied. Certainly Piers gave evidence at Leveson, you'll remember. He absolutely denied any involvement on phone hacking to Leveson. So his own evidence now has to be looked at. But again, these are criminal activities. Should the police now get involved? And if that's right, well, what is the future for the senior executives over Association Newspapers and News who oversaw the criminal activity there?
Yeah, very many high-level questions which arise as a result of what we have heard today. And just a reminder, Prince Harry's case was one of 4 test cases that was heard by the High Court earlier this year. We can take you through the rulings in each of those 4 cases. Well, Prince Harry has been awarded more than £140,000 after the judge ruled that 15 out of the 33 articles were the product of phone hacking or other unlawful information gathering. Michael Lavelle, who plays Kevin Webster in Coronation Street, has been awarded £31,650 in damages. That is after the judge ruled that 4 out of 27 articles involving him involved unlawful information gathering. But the cases of the former Coronation Street actress Nikki Sanderson and Fiona Whiteman, who's the ex-wife of the comedian Paul Whitehouse, now they were barred by the judge because the times for their claims have expired. They had 6 years to bring their cases. Well, let's bring in Laura again. It was a very powerful statement delivered there by David Sherborne, the representative for the claimants, most notably Prince Harry, suggesting as well that he had had some time to think about what the judgment meant. he's very happy and he's undeterred.
Absolutely. And I think let's just cast our mind back. This is Prince Harry's witness statement. So this is what we look back at it and you can see why it means so much of it. He said he wanted to save journalism as a profession, to expose those people in the media that have stolen or hijacked the privileges and powers of the press. He said he had a unique perspective and experience because he had a front row seat to it. He said they felt there was a responsibility he had to expose criminal activity in the name of public interest. He wrote, the country and the British public deserve to know the depths of what was actually happening then and indeed now. We will be better off for it, he says. So that was his starting point. To the extent to which he feels better off, I would imagine he certainly will today, because he has proved that he is the victim of phone hacking and of blagging. This is what he set out to prove. That was the reason for it. But as for where he goes from here, he has other articles written about him. He has other cases involving other newspaper groups. And what has happened here today will be looked at very closely by those other newspaper groups who will be looking at the articles that they've written about him as well and really considering, were the private investigators that other newspapers used the same as the ones the Mirror? We know they were, because the journalists were swapping around from other titles. So where does this leave their cases? Harry, I think, will be fired up. He will be ready for those next cases.
Nonetheless, the judge did say that the Duke of Sussex did have a tendency to believe everything had been obtained via phone hacking when that wasn't the case. Jonathan.
Well, and that will doubtless appear in tabloid newspapers written in big letters. But I think one must put oneself in Harry's position. Well, eventually you're going to become paranoid. Now, we know this from other claimants. You begin to think, well, you know, who's selling these stories? Other claimants have lost friendships, lost business relationships. So I very much take the judge's point, but I would imagine reach the point where you start to see things that aren't there, because you've been driven to that point, because you suddenly see information about you which you know is private, and another point that he frequently made, which goes to his security, turning up in newspapers. Well, if that doesn't generate in a human sense a degree of paranoia, well, I don't know what does.
I should reflect the response from Mirror Group newspapers, who have said, we welcome today's judgment that gives the business the necessary clarity to move forward from events that took place many years ago. Where historical wrongdoing took place, we apologise unreservedly, have taken full responsibility and have paid appropriate compensation. But the judge has left the door open, the potential that Prince Harry could still put forward another 100+ articles that he says were published from unlawfully obtained information.
And those articles sat there waiting in the wings. I think if we take a step back from this, and we know there are other cases down the road from Prince Harry, he's had a win today, but I think there is a bigger question for him. He is going to always struggle to win the court of public opinion over this, because there are a lot of people who will say, here is Harry, a poster boy of privacy cases, fighting for privacy, and yet here is also Harry, who has himself published these very private details, these private moments within his family. He has exposed a lot of this information, and you have this sort of mismatch between Harry, the campaigner for privacy, and Harry, who is quite happy on his terms to give interviews, to create Netflix series, to write the memoir. And so he has a win, a legal win, but does this change his standing? Does this change people's views of him? I'm not sure it will.
Yeah, the court of public opinion is very different, isn't it, from a judicial one that we've seen. And to your mind, Jonathan, what is the most significant thing that we saw in today's judgment?
It's merely that the knowledge and complicity of this activity went right to the top of the newspaper group. You know, it just isn't, therefore, something which was junior people getting up to no good, or, as the News of the World said, one rogue reporter. This went right to the top. Now, that is a seismic question then, which then lumps in the hands of politicians. Well, what do we do about this? You know, after Leveson, Leveson recommended a regulator which was properly tough and had right in the long distance a small statutory underlay like Ofcom. Now, Fleetstra said, no, we don't have to be regulated. We'll do our own homework marking. But we've got to go back and ask ourselves as a nation, this is what Harry wants us to do, is, well, do we want a better regulated press? We rely on the press to know what's going on. And if this is the kind of activity which they got up to and right to the top, well, aren't we entitled to a better quality press, which is what Harry has asked, and my own view is that we are. But for that to happen, our politicians have got to show the courage they haven't currently shown to take the press on and say, no, I'm sorry, we're not going to allow you to regulate yourself. We are now going to take in hand and get some proper regulation for you because you've shown that you can't do it yourself.
OK, a momentous day here. It has just gone 11:30. We have been live for you throughout the morning at the Royal Courts of Justice in central London. In the past hour, a judge has ruled that there was extensive phone hacking by Mirror Group newspapers between 2006 and 2011. Mr. Justice Fancourt has been passing judgment on a privacy case brought by the Duke of Sussex against the publisher of the Daily Mirror. He found that 15 out of 33 articles about Prince Harry were the product of phone hacking or other unlawful information gathering. Well, let's bring in Steve Barnett. He's a board member at Hacked Off and also Professor of Communications at the University of Westminster. Steve, apologies, I had to cut you off earlier so that we could bring our viewers the statement from David Sherborne, KC. You were saying at the time that I was speaking to you earlier, you were almost lost for words at the significance of the judgment. You've had a little longer to think about it. What are your reflections?
Well, I want to pick up on something that was in David Sherborne's statement, quoting Prince Harry, when he talked about the need for accountability. Because, yes, this is frankly a comprehensive victory for Prince Harry on the facts. And the finding that there was essentially a cover-up at the very top, including the editors, and the judgment makes clear that he thinks that the editors would have known what was going on. The question of accountability comes back to what we do now. And it's just this week there was a debate about an attempt by the government to repeal part of the framework that Leveson had recommended in the light of phone hacking, which would give us a more accountable press. And I think this this charge that he's on, that we need a press that is certainly free, but is also held accountable because of its power and its power to abuse people, I think has been given much more weight today. And I think we need to ask serious questions now about how we are going to develop a framework to ensure that not just the people who have the means and the courage to take on the press, but ordinary people who can suffer on a daily basis from inaccuracy, from intrusion into grief, the kinds of things that I'm afraid our newspapers still do on a regular basis. How can we prevent that happening? How can we ensure that ordinary people are protected from this kind of abuse of power? And I think if there's one takeaway from me from today's ruling, it is about abuse of power. These are very powerful media corporations using that power and that weight to cover up criminality, but also to do things under the name of journalism. And personally, as someone who has spent many years teaching aspiring journalists, it's deeply regretful that there are organizations who pretend to do journalism when actually what they're doing is criminal activity.
Steve, in terms of holding power to account, what we saw today as well was liability being pushed further up the chain. Where does that leave those who were in charge, some of whom said categorically that they knew nothing of those activities? They said it under oath at Leveson.
They said it under oath, and the judge is casting doubt on that and saying essentially he does not believe their evidence. And if they were lying under oath, they have committed a criminal offence. And I'm afraid that that is a matter for the police. So I would expect now there to be some pressure on the police to look into this and to take whatever action they feel might be necessary to bring to justice people who have lied under oath, because that is a serious offence. The one more thing I would say about this judgment is the witnesses, the journalist witnesses who turned whistleblower, those who were saying this is what happened within Mirror Group, were given a very hard time. Their credibility was put under the microscope. And it's perfectly clear that the judge said these were credible, reliable witnesses. And I think that's something that other publishers might find quite difficult, quite awkward in the cases coming down the road, because he did not believe the senior executive denied everything.
The judgment today was about Mirror Group newspapers. A spokesperson for the group has said, where historical wrongdoings took place, we apologise unreservedly, have taken full responsibility and paid appropriate compensation. They're clearly keen to draw a line under this and move on, but I imagine that you don't accept that.
I don't accept that the culture has suddenly changed. And this comes back to the question of accountability. You don't change cultures overnight, and it's not just at Mirror Group. I'm afraid that there are other national newspapers where, as we will see shortly in both the News Group, the Murdoch Press, and the Mail newspapers, whether there are similar unlawful information gathering techniques that took place. The only way that you do something about that in the longer term, as I said, is actually implementing a structure of accountability, doing what Leveson recommended, and saying we need independent and effective self-regulation. And then we get decent journalism, and the kinds of the young kids who are going into journalism, who are inspired by some of the great exploits of journalists, won't have to do the kinds of things that they were told to do at Mirror Group and probably at other publishers in order to get a byline story. We can have some decent, accurate journalism holding power to account. At the moment, what we've got is Prince Harry holding power to account, and he shouldn't have to go through the courts to do it.
All right, Steve Barnett, very good to get your perspective here on Sky News. A momentous day here at the Royal Courts of Justice, where Mr. Justice Fancourt has found extensive phone hacking by Mirror Group newspapers from 2006 to 2011. Well, immediately after the ruling, that judgment was passed down behind closed doors there. We heard from Prince Harry's lawyer, David Sherborne. Casey.
Today is a great day for truth as well as accountability. The court has ruled that unlawful and criminal activities were carried out at all three Mirror Group newspaper titles, the Mirror, the Sunday Mirror and the People, on a habitual and widespread basis for over more than a decade. I'd like to thank my legal team for so successfully dismantling the sworn testimony of Mirror Group's senior executives, legal department and journalists who at least turned up to court, unlike their colleagues who were perhaps too afraid to do so. This case is not just about hacking. It is about a systemic practice of unlawful and appalling behaviour, followed by cover-ups and destruction of evidence, the shocking scale of which can only be revealed through these proceedings. The court has found that Mirror Group's principal board directors, their legal department, senior executives and editors such as Piers Morgan clearly knew about or were involved in these illegal activities. Between them, they even went as far as lying under oath to Parliament during the Leveson Inquiry, to the Stock Exchange, and to us all ever since. The journey to justice can be a slow and painful one, and since bringing my claim almost 5 years ago, defamatory stories and intimidating tactics have been deployed against me and at my family's expense. And so, as I too have learnt through this process, patience is in fact a virtue, especially in the face of vendetta journalism. I hope that the court's findings will serve as a warning to all media organisations who have employed these practices and then similarly lied about them. Mirror Group's actions were so calculated and misleading that their pattern of destroying evidence and concealing their unlawful behaviour continued into the litigation itself, and as the judge has ruled, even to this day. I am happy to have won the case, especially given that this trial only looked at a quarter of my entire claim. Even on just that, it is clear Mirror Group's persistent attempts to suggest that my claim was, to quote their counsel, fantastical, in the realms of total speculation, and there was simply no evidence at all to suggest I was hacked. Zilch, zero, nil, nada, niente, absolutely nothing. All of that was total nonsense and was used maliciously to attack my character and credibility. However, as Mirror Group intended, those hollow sound bites were blasted across front pages and across online platforms and into the next day's morning television shows. The court has in fact confirmed that all 4 claimants were subjected to voicemail interception and unlawful information gathering, but no one would have believed that was the case given how this trial was covered in the UK. My commitment to seeing this case through is based on my belief in our need and collective right to a free and honest press, and one which is properly accountable when necessary. That is what we need in Britain and across the globe. Anything else is poisoning the well for a profession we all depend on. The acts listed in this judgment are prime examples of what happens when the power of the press is abused. I respectfully call upon the authorities, the financial regulator, the stock market who were deliberately deceived by Mirror Group, and indeed the Metropolitan Police and prosecuting authorities to do their duty for the British public and to investigate bringing charges against the company and those who have broken the law. Today's ruling is vindicating and affirming. I've been told that slaying dragons will get you burned, but in light of today's victory and the importance of doing what is needed for a free and honest press, it is a worthwhile price to pay. The mission continues.
Well, media lawyer Jonathan Coad has been with us all morning to pore over that judgment. A pretty punchy statement there, Jonathan, from the Duke of Sussex. The mission continues, he says. Is this really the start of broader things to come?
Well, that's what he wants. I mean, he's clearly in it to try and... It's a massive undertaking to change the culture of the British press. Now, the culture of British press has been pretty ugly for a very long time. And Prince has been accused, by his family, of being on a suicide mission to change it, but that's what he set out to do. And if you could imagine it in the terms of a warrior, which is what he is, this is the first victory in a longer war. I don't think he's going to stop until he's brought some change, but the change is going to have to be a change in the way that the press is regulated. That's what he's eventually shooting for.
Leveson too.
Well, also Leveson too, but I think that's probably a harder one to win. But, at the moment we still have the press marking its own homework. Independent Press Standards Organisation is not independent and it doesn't impose standards. It is now the 4th incarnation of press self-regulation, and it still doesn't work properly. That's what he's trying to change.
The statement from the Mirror Group very clearly wanting to draw a line under this, saying these were all historical behaviours. they're not happening anymore. We have taken full accountability. We have paid compensation. We've cleaned up. We're moving on. That is what the newspaper groups are going to be saying, isn't it?
Well, indeed, that's the only line they can play. But in one sense, it's not historical. The Prince has had to come to this court, has had to spend a day and a half giving evidence to bring the paper to this point. Now, what is easy to forget is that all the information which the judge has made his decision on, finding the paper guilty of this, was available to the newspaper throughout, and a load more, because there's plenty of evidence. They've destroyed some of their own evidence as well. Now, it was within the paper's power, obviously, to engage. So ITV, for example, engaged in an independent KC to look into the Philip Schofield drama. Incidentally, Philip Schofield was my client. Now, there was nothing to stop a KC being engaged by the newspaper to look at all the papers and make a decision as to what went on. Well, the newspaper decided not to do that, and it's taken, the King's second son, amongst criticism the whole of Fleet Street, to bring the newspaper to this point. The denials went on until today, so it's not historic.
And what is significant is what we have seen to date is newspapers either reaching settlements with people so the cases never get to trial,
yep,
or saying, yes, bad things did go on, we acknowledge that, but we didn't know about it further up the chain. These were junior reporters, private investigators, nothing to do with us. This changes that.
Well, it absolutely does, and we all remember the one rogue reporter story played out in the news of the world. Eventually it became clear that the newspaper was rotten to the core and it had to be thrown under the bus by News UK. But here we've got two top people at the paper, Paul Vickers, Sly Bailey, board members who have been damned in this report as having not only known about it, been complicit in it. I mean, it is absolutely seismic that right to a board level, a national newspaper which wields so much power, which will not allow itself to be regulated independently, has been caught with their, both hands in the cookie jar.
The judge did say that the Duke of Sussex did have a tendency to believe that every article about him had been because of phone hacking, which the judge didn't find. He found that unlawful information gathering was the case in 15 out of the 33. Prince Harry has had a big problem with Piers Morgan, hasn't he, over the years? What did the judge have to say about Piers Morgan, who was in charge of the Mirror newspaper for a number of the years which is concerned with this case?
Well, Piers has been found guilty as well. And that is a significant thing in the relationship between Piers and Harry, who've fought each other like two warriors over the years. But then...
What did the judge say specifically about Piers Morgan?
Well, that he knew that this activity was going on. I mean, he can't say more than that, because that is where, that is as far as he can go. But the point, therefore, is where does the state go in deciding what should be done about Mr. Morgan? I mean, he gave evidence. I remember watching it. He gave evidence in the Leveson Inquiry, remember, from America, in a room which I suspect is populated with lawyers, where he looked down to the screen and he said to the world of Lord Leveson, I was not, phone hacking, nothing to do with me, didn't know it was going on, so that's it, I'm out. But that has now come crashing down. So Piers Morgan.
So what happens then in terms of revisiting testimony which was given under oath?
Well, that's what the government's going to have to do. And this is why this is so seismic, even to the point of being constitutional, because historically the government has always, of whatever complexion, Labour or Conservative, has fought shy of taking on Fleet Street. And that's one of the reasons why Prince Harry's tried to do it. And the problem the government has is they can be voted out of office. And when you've got people like Paul Dacre, people like powerful people, Rupert Murdoch, sorry, the name wouldn't come, effectively saying, you take us on, we dump you out of government, then it's very difficult for politicians to take this battle on. Prince Harry has the advantage that he's not a politician. He is Prince Harry. So
with all the resources behind him that he has.
With all the resources, but also the courage of a warrior. I mean, one of the points that he made was that he's been the subject of vicious, aggressive attacks on the part not only of the Mirror but Fleet Street as a whole. Now, I have seen this in my own practice. One of my celebrity clients was suing the Mirror when Piers Morgan was the editor, and where Marcus Partington, who again was found guilty in this judgment, was the senior lawyer. Now, this is one line from the letter that was sent to me. If your client were foolish enough to, if your firm were foolish enough to issue proceedings, and if your client was foolish enough to accept that advice, then he will find, to his own immense personal and financial cost, he's picked the wrong fight over the wrong article with the wrong newspaper. Now, that's the kind of studs-up litigation that Prince Harry has taken on and defeated. But the point is, do we want a press that behaves like that? My own view is that we don't. And Harry's fought the battle and says it needs to change, but it's only going to change if politicians have the courage to take Fleet Street on. At the moment, they've shown a complete lack of intention of doing so.
And in terms of what we might predict from the other cases against other newspaper groups, what might we see, do you think, based on today?
Well, the problem that they've got is they can't stop Prince Harry. They've historically thrown vast sums of money.
Paid people off and reached the point. So Chris Huhne, the senior Liberal, stood outside court and said eventually the point came where I've been offered so much money that if I take the case any further, I'm going to lose out. Now, the way that works is at the end of a case, if someone has been offered a bigger sum than the court awards, then the costs award can be reversed, so they can end up paying out more money in costs than they have in damages. And that's what newspapers have done. They force people to settle by throwing money at it, but they can't do that to Prince Harry. And so the other newspaper, I imagine boardrooms will be quaking in their shoes because Harry's out to get them as well. And he's won this one, and I think they'll assume that he's likely to win against them too. And newspapers, of course, have faced a huge number of commercial pressures over the years. Could this be ruinous, do you think, for some of them?
Well, that would only be if people start pulling advertising. I mean, I think probably not. I mean, I don't think that they'll be worried so much commercially. What they will be worried about, two things, I think, that senior board members who traditionally don't appear anyway. I mean, by contrast to the BBC, whenever there's a problem at the BBC, first people to report it, the BBC. Senior people from the BBC, straight on screen, giving an account of what's going on. Nothing like that, Fleet Street. You never see senior Fleet Street people
but
going in front
corporate governance requires that you have a fiduciary responsibility, doesn't it? You need to be accountable if you're on the board.
Yes, you do. But again, if you're going to be accountable, someone's got to have the courage to hold you accountable. And that's the point.
And that's what we've got here.
Well, yes, in the form of Prince Harry, but no in the form of government. I mean, you remember after Leveson, the government said, absolutely, Leveson, appalling, what he's found is dreadful, and we're going to do something about it. We're going to make sure that the press regulates itself according to the Leveson principles. It never happened.
And as far as the Mirror Group is concerned, they clearly want to draw a line under it. They say it's all historical. Will they appeal, just quickly?
I imagine they'll have no choice but to appeal, but it won't be easy because this is a carefully considered judgment by an expert judge who saw the witnesses face to face. I think the Court of Appeal probably won't allow an appeal to go ahead.
All right, but a momentous day today, nonetheless, here outside the Royal Courts of Justice. A reminder that Prince Harry's case was one of 4 test cases that was heard by the High Court in a 6-7 week trial that took place this summer. We can take you through the rulings now in each of those cases. Prince Harry, the most well-known, of course, of the 4 claimants, has been awarded more than £140,000 after the judge ruled that 15 out of 33 articles were the product of phone hacking or other unlawful information. gathering. Michael Lavelle, who plays Kevin Webster in Coronation Street, has been awarded £31,650 in damages after the judge ruled that 4 out of 27 articles involved unlawful information gathering. Nikki Sanderson, former Coronation Street actress, and Fiona Whiteman's, the ex-wife of comedian Paul Whitehouse's, cases were barred because the times for their claims have expired. They had 6 years to bring their cases. Well, as saying, a momentous day here where the judge, Mr. Justice Fancourt, has found extensive phone hacking from the Mirror Group. We'll be bringing you plenty This is Sky News Today. It is 12 o'clock. We have been live here at the Royal Courts of Justice in central London. A judge awards Prince Harry more than £140,000 after ruling that articles published by the Mirror Group newspapers were the product of unlawful information gathering. The judge said there was extensive phone hacking by Mirror Group. Prince Harry's lawyer welcomed the judgment.
This case is not just about hacking. It is about a systemic practice of unlawful and appalling behaviour.
Mirror Group, publishers of the Daily Mirror, Sunday Mirror and The People have apologised unreservedly, saying it takes full responsibility. We're live outside the court with all the reaction to this morning's judgment. Very good afternoon to you from just outside the Royal Courts of Justice, where Prince Harry has been awarded £140,600 after a High Court judge ruled that articles published by Mirror Group newspapers were the product of phone hacking and other methods of unlawful information gathering. Prince Harry gave evidence back in June, becoming the first royal to take the stand in 130 years, arguing the 33 articles that were published about him between 1996 and 2009 used information which had been obtained unlawfully. The judge has ruled that 15 of those articles were indeed the product of unlawful information gathering, including phone hacking. In his judgment summary, Mr. Justice Fancourt said, "I have found the Duke's case of voicemail interception and unlawful information gathering proved in part only. I found that 15 out of the 33 articles that were tried were the product of phone hacking of his mobile phone, or indeed the mobile phones of his associates, or the product of other unlawful information gathering. I consider that his phone was only hacked to a modest extent, and that this was probably carefully controlled by certain people at each newspaper. However, it did happen on occasions from about the end of 2003 to April 2009. Well, immediately after the ruling, we heard from Prince Harry's lawyer, David Sherborne KC.
Today is a great day for truth, as well as accountability. The court has ruled that unlawful and criminal activities were carried out at all three Mirror Group newspaper titles, The Mirror, The Sunday Mirror and The People, on a habitual and widespread basis for over more than a decade. I'd like to thank my legal team for so successfully dismantling the sworn testimony of Mirror Group's senior executives, legal department and journalists who at least turned up to court, unlike their colleagues who were perhaps too afraid to do so. This case is not just about hacking. It is about a systemic practice of unlawful and appalling behaviour, followed by cover-ups and destruction of evidence, the shocking scale of which can only be revealed through these proceedings. The court has found that Mirror Group's principal board directors, their legal department, senior executives and editors such as Piers Morgan clearly knew about or were involved in these illegal activities. Between them, they even went as far as lying under oath to Parliament during the Leveson Inquiry, to the Stock Exchange and to us all ever since. The journey to justice can be a slow and painful one, and since bringing my claim almost 5 years ago, defamatory stories and intimidating tactics have been deployed against me and at my family's expense. And so, as I too have learnt through this process, patience is in fact a virtue, especially in the face of vendetta journalism. I hope that the court's findings will serve as a warning to all media organisations who have employed these practices and then similarly lied about them. Mirror Group's actions were so calculated and misleading that their pattern of destroying evidence and concealing their unlawful behaviour continued into the litigation itself, and as the judge has ruled, even to this day. I am happy to have won the case, especially given that this trial only looked at a quarter of my entire claim. Even on just that, it is clear Mirror Group's persistent attempts to suggest that my claim was, to quote their counsel, fantastical, in the realms of total speculation, and there was simply no evidence at all to suggest I was hacked. Zilch, zero, nil, nada, niente, absolutely nothing. All of that was total nonsense and was used maliciously to attack my character and credibility. However, as Mirror Group intended, those hollow sound bites were blasted across front pages and across online platforms and into the next day's morning television shows. The court has in fact confirmed that all 4 claimants were subjected to voicemail interception and unlawful information gathering. But no one would have believed that was the case, given how this trial was covered in the UK. My commitment to seeing this case through is based on my belief in our need and collective right to a free and honest press, and one which is properly accountable when necessary. That is what we need in Britain and across the globe. Anything else is poisoning the well for a profession we all depend on. The acts listed in this judgment are prime examples of what happens when the power of the press is abused. I respectfully call upon the authorities, the financial regulator, the stock market who were deliberately deceived by Mirror Group, and indeed the Metropolitan Police and prosecuting authorities to do their duty for the British public and to investigate bringing charges against the company and those who have broken the law. Today's ruling is vindicating and affirming. I've been told that slaying dragons will get you burned, but in light of today's victory and the importance of doing what is needed for a free and honest press, it is a worthwhile price to pay. The mission continues.
Well, that was David Sherborne, KC, the representative for the Duke of Sussex. A spokesperson for the Mirror Group newspapers has said the following. We welcome today's judgment that gives the business the necessary clarity to move forward from events that took place many years ago. They added, where historical wrongdoing took place, we apologise unreservedly, have taken full responsibility and paid appropriate compensation. Well, it's been a very significant day here outside the Royal Courts of Justice. I have our royal correspondent, Laura Bundock, who's been following all of the developments today. Prince Harry clearly feeling like his mission to take on the press, he has been vindicated.
Absolutely. Look at the language he used in the statement. It was clear he probably would have wanted to be here, wasn't given enough time to come here in person, but speaking through his barrister, say, today is a great day for truth and accountability. This case isn't about hacking, he said, it's about a systemic practice of unlawful and appalling behaviour, adding, I hope the court's findings will serve as a warning to all media organisations who've employed these practices. And listen to the ending, talking about slaying dragons, and he says it's at a worthwhile price to pay. The mission continues, and therein I think we have a huge statement from Harry. This is not the end of it. This is purely chapter 1 done in his mission to take on the tabloid press, a mission that so far has given him a win. He has succeeded. He has proved that he is a victim of phone hacking and blagging for 15 of those 33 articles. It's interesting, if you look at which articles came up, the vast majority of the articles which the judge accepted were the subject of hacking and blagging, were articles relating to his ex-girlfriend Chelsea Davy, headlines that were written about their relationship. Not just the Duke's phone, Prince Harry's phone being hacked, but
his associates.
Absolutely. And I think there is a sense the judge perhaps felt Harry was just automatically saying, it must be my phone was hacked. He said, no, it wasn't the case in a lot of these stories, but that the associates, those you were hanging around with, those closest to you, were certainly the victims as well.
Important to say, though, that the judge did say that he thought that the extent to which Prince Harry's phone had been hacked was modest, and that he hasn't upheld more than half of the articles as being based on unlawfully obtained information.
It's funny because this is a numbers game in some way, and it also isn't a numbers game, because one article would have been vindication for Harry in the sense that Mirror Group had always denied that they'd ever hacked or blagged Harry's private information, and just one article would have shown that they didn't tell the truth when they said that. We now know that 15 of those 33 articles, that was the case for. And don't forget, that was only a small sample, those 33 articles, of the total number that Harry had presented presented to this court. So there are lots of others just sat there, articles, that may well pop back up again, that he may want to take those claims further. If he doesn't, though, he still has 2 outstanding actions against 2 other newspaper groups. News Group, publishers of The Sun, Associated Publishers of the Daily Mail. Those cases are outstanding, and I think very clearly when he says the mission continues, we know who is in his sights now.
All right, well, we'll be exploring the legal ramifications as well, won't we? But for now, Laura, thank you very much indeed. Let's bring you up to date on the main outcomes from the Duke of Sussex's ruling. Well, in a 386-page document, the judge ruled that 15 out of the 33 articles, which were the basis of what the court heard in that 7-week trial in the summer, were the product of phone hacking or indeed other unlawful information gathering. He also said that Harry's phone was probably hacked to a modest extent by the publisher, which was carefully controlled by certain people. As a result, the Duke of Sussex has been awarded more than £140,000. In a statement, MGN has offered an unreserved apology, saying that they have taken full responsibility for the practices. Well, remember, Prince Harry's case was one of 4 test cases that was heard by the High Court earlier this year. We can take you through the rulings in each of those cases. Michael Lavelle, who plays Kevin Webster in Coronation Street, has been awarded £31,650 in damages after the judge ruled that 4 out of 27 articles involved unlawful information gathering. But the cases of the former Coronation Street actress Nikki Sanderson and Fiona Whiteman, the ex-wife of comedian Paul Whitehouse, were barred because the times for their claims have expired. They had 6 years to bring their cases. Well, we can bring back in media lawyer Jonathan Code. Jonathan, we were saying what a momentous day it is, really. The details of that judgment go far and wide, don't they?
They do. I mean, they go to the Prince's image, the Prince's future, the Prince's mission. But beyond that, it goes to, I mean, the buck really starts to land on the government thereafter. The Prince has set out to change the culture of the British press. Now, I regret to say, having fought the British press for 30 years, that's not going to change the culture until there's improved regulation. One of the reasons why the journalism is better for the broadcast media, like Sky and the BBC, is because you're properly regulated. The press still rules its own roost. It still marks its own homework. And what Prince Harry has said is, I want to get out and prove that that doesn't work, that the press is still essentially is out of control. Now, he succeeded in doing that. I don't think it's enough for the newspaper in this question, in this case, for the Mirror Group to say, well, it's all in the past, because it's not really. You know, they're still not regulated properly. They fought this case tooth and nail. They have never instituted a proper independent inquiry as to their own culture and practices. Now, you remember, the BBC is always doing independent inquiries, and recently ITV has spent a lot of money and spent a lot of time inquiring into its own relatively modest failings concerning the Philip Schofield incident, something that I know about because I'm his lawyer. Now, where is Fleet Street doing this? None. No effort, as far as I know, to actually have a proper look through an independent lens at their own culture. That's one of the things that really should change.
Duke of Sussex saying the mission continues. Now he's got other irons in the fire as far as the legal process is concerned. He's also calling on, interestingly, in his statement, further action from police and from the financial regulator as well. Well,
he's right to, because although this is a finding on the lower standard of proof, so in the criminal court it's beyond reasonable doubt. Here, Justice Fancourt has found on the balance of probabilities, but nonetheless, he has found serial criminal activity on the part of one of the most powerful institutions in this country, and that activity went right to the top, 2 of the directors. Now, If that isn't something that the police should be involved in, I don't know what is. But then the police itself, you know, the newspapers, we know it came out and Leveson wield a lot of power in the police. Are the police going to do something about it? Well, we'll have to wait and see, but surely they should.
Many things that may well flow from the momentous judgment that we had handed down from Mr. Justice Fancourt earlier this morning. Do stay with us. Coming up next, I'm going to be speaking to a former editor of the Sunday Mirror and former deputy editor of the Daily Mirror and News of the World. On today, as Prince Harry is awarded damages in his privacy case.
And I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C. Well, the plan seems to be to head to the police station where the policeman who fired the shots was based.
And everything, his memories is all gone.
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
We have to get Trump out of the White House.
I'm playing devil's advocate.
You get your political agenda.
No, it's honestly...
God love you.
And beyond the United States, I report from around the world.
This is a town that is effectively encircled by the Russians.
We take you to the heart of stories that shape our planet.
Yeah, I can hear now quite a few explosions in the distance here in Jerusalem.
What do you think of ISIS?
Everybody here, they know the truth of ISIS.
Hello again. Welcome back to the Royal Courts of Justice, where Prince Harry has been awarded more than £140,000 in damages from Mirror Group newspapers after the High Court ruled that 15 articles about him were the product of unlawful information gathering, including phone hacking. Prince Harry gave evidence back in June, becoming the first royal to take the stand in 130 years. Arguing that 33 articles published between 1996 and 2009 used information that had been obtained unlawfully. The judge ruled in his favour on 15 out of 33 of those articles. Mirror Group Newspapers has now apologised unreservedly and says it takes full responsibility. The ruling was welcomed by Prince Harry's lawyer outside court.
This case is not just about hacking. It is about a systemic practice of unlawful and appalling behaviour, followed by cover-ups and destruction of evidence, the shocking scale of which can only be revealed through these proceedings. The court has found that Mirror Group's principal board directors, their legal department, senior executives and editors such as Piers Morgan clearly knew about or were involved in these illegal activities. Between them, they even went as far as lying under oath to Parliament during the Leveson Inquiry, to the Stock Exchange, and to us all ever since. The journey to justice can be a slow and painful one, and since bringing my claim almost 5 years ago, defamatory stories and intimidating tactics have been deployed against me and at my family's expense. And so, as I too have learnt through this process, patience is, in fact, a virtue, especially in the face of vendetta journalism.
Well, with me now is Paul Connew, former editor of the Sunday Mirror and former deputy editor of the Daily Mirror and News of the World. Paul, thank you for waiting. I've kept you there in the cold for a long time this morning. What do you make of today's judgment?
Prince Harry will be much happier than the Mirror Group, and I'm sure that the royal family will be looking at this judgment with interest, and so will the other newspapers who, of course, are still in Prince Harry's legal firing line.
The judge, though, didn't find in favour of all of the articles put forward by Prince Harry, did he? 15 out of 33. What will the discussion be, do you think, amongst the executives, the board level, within the Mirror newspaper group, about where they go from here?
Well, of course, they have a lot of other cases in the pipeline, which this case may affect whether they try to settle other cases out of court or not. They probably would have liked to settle this one out of court in all truth.
For Prince Harry, it was the principle.
Prince Harry sees himself on a crusade, some would say an obsession, but he sees it as a crusade, and he'll be very pleased. The money doesn't really matter to him. He sees it as a principle in what he sees is his campaign against media wrongdoing. That's an arguable point, whether he sometimes exaggerated what he saw as press intrusion, but one has to accept that he is someone who is embittered by the loss of his mother and blames the media for that, even when it wasn't the case. But it's going to be a question now of how other media organisations who he is suing, how they react, whether there's any move to settle out of court there, or whether they're determined to actually fight their cases.
Paul, I'm just going to interrupt you there for one moment. We'll be back with you in a minute, but I'm being told we've got some breaking news to be brought to us by Belle back in Sky Studios.
Sam, yes, thank you. Some breaking news coming to us from Norfolk Constabulary. This relating to the missing 55-year-old woman, Gaynor Lord. Police searching, they say, this is from the police statement. Police searching for the missing Norwich woman, Gaynor Lord, can confirm a body has been found in the River Wensum. The body was found in the river by underwater search teams. That happened this morning. It's now been recovered from the water. Now, the body has not been formally identified, but Gaynor's family have been informed. They continue to be supported by specially trained officers. There ends the statement from Norfolk Constabulary. You'll remember, of course, that the 55-year-old woman went missing last week, leaving behind 3 children. She left work early, and police were struggling to work out why she might have left work early, but it had been said earlier today by officers that they thought there was a high probability that she had gone into the River Wensum in Norwich, which is why, of course, that search was being conducted then. The wider context of this is Norfolk Police being careful about the information that they give to the media and how they handle this missing case, given the context of the missing Lancashire woman, Nicola Bully. We'll come back to this as soon as we get more for you. But for now, a body has been found of Gaynor Lord in the River Wensum.